Cha Wanikisak, Natasuislia, Wanani Nahanagansic, Natomas Aquinnah, Natai North Providence. Hello, everyone. My name is Leah, and I come from the Narragansett Nation right here in Rhode Island. I grew up in the area of Aquinnah, or known today as North Kingstown, and I live currently with my blended Narragansett and Wampanoag family here in North Providence. And I'm really happy to be here and sharing my very favorite time with you. This is maple season. And so maple season has a really strong importance for my family. Just gonna move the chair out of the way here. And we have been harvesting maple in New England for thousands of years. My family has been harvesting maple going on pushing 10 years now. And it's just a really rewarding time of the year where we gather together and we go into our sugar bushes that we steward, and we collect the maple sap. And today is such a beautiful day for collecting sap. I think it's in the 40s right now, and this is exactly what you want when you have maple when you have maple sap running. And so I'm just adjusting my heat here because we don't want anything to burn. And so our family goes out almost every year. We didn't go last year because of everything that was up in the air. And that was a really sad time for me because we just didn't know what was going on. We were unsure of crossing state boundaries and lines and traveling. So we held back on maple harvesting last year, but this year we decided to go all in, and we have 2 sugar bushes that we steward and help take care of. And I say steward because those pieces of land, they are not within our concept today of my property. They are lands that we share with other people, and we're very happy that we have access to these places, and that our connection to these places within our homeland is honored by the people who look after the land. And so this year, so far, we have 24 taps in our trees, and we use the modern day style of tapping. We don't use the more industrial style or vacuum style of taps. We use just kind of an old-fashioned bucket and a spile here. Here, I'll put it right on the maple cam so you can see. So we have a 7, I believe it's 7/8 inch spile, and this will get a hole will be drilled into the tree around 2 inches to 2.5 inches, and we tap the spile right into the tree. And this hook here, on this hook, we have the bucket hanging, and we have a cover so none of the rain gets into it. Unfortunately, it was very windy yesterday here in the Northeast, and our sap buckets blew off of our trees. So we lost some of our sap, but luckily we have some maple for our program here today. Normally my house at this time of the year, because we don't have an evaporator, we don't have a large processing station, we do everything in the house. So it normally gets pretty steamy in here. I have to admit, I love it. I love, especially because it's so chilly outside and the heat's been running, it gets very dry in the house. So once we are processing the maple in the house, all the windows get all foggy and I feel like I can breathe better. I guess growing up here on the coast in summer, it's always humid, and I love humidity. Even though my hair may not love it, I love the humidity, and it makes me feel really good, and it makes me feel warm. And it's just an important and sacred feeling to just kind of be in your home and moving around in these maple clouds. It's something that I can't really describe other than that, but I absolutely love it. My little one, he's 4, he loves going out and helping us tap trees, and he loves helping us out in what we call maple camp. And so what we have going on today is, here I have this copper pot that I am boiling maple syrup in. This is not the maple syrup that I made, because so far we have collected somewhere around 20 gallons this year of maple syrup, which anyone who has ever made, or of maple sap, anyone who has ever made maple syrup knows 20 gallons gets you about this much maple syrup. I have one more jar, I should say, in the refrigerator, but the typical ratio of sap to sugar is 40-1. So it takes 40 gallons of maple sap of tree water to make 1 gallon of maple syrup. So that is why when you go to the grocery store, you will see maple syrup being sold around $20 for a half gallon, because it's a very time consuming process. A lot of resources go into it. And so now you have many modern companies who tap hundreds and hundreds of trees, maybe in Canada or in New Hampshire, or if you're further in the Midwest, in the areas of Michigan. But there are also Indigenous producers of maple syrup. I'm most familiar with 2 of them. My favorite one, these are my relatives here, and I'm going to give them a shout out. This is the Mashantucket Pequot tribal nation, and they have provided my family with wikapahik, so maple syrup, which translates roughly in our language to sweet soup, or sweet soupy water. And so we have this wikapahik, which has been created, or made, I should say, by the Mashantucket Sugar Shack. So they're about an hour away from us, our Mashantucket Pequot relatives. And we have a link that we can share with you right here in the chat. If you're interested in buying and investing in a local tribal community and in their economic development, buying maple syrup from Native community members and tribal nations is what my family tries to do when we are out of our own maple syrup and maple sugar. So when you boil maple syrup, or excuse me, I'm going to do this a lot, but when you boil maple sap, the first stage that you will reach is maple syrup. And what we know that water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, but to get it to turn to sugar, you need to boil for many, many hours. I think our last boil we did was on Sunday, and we started boiling at about 2 in the afternoon, and we wrapped up around midnight. And that was just 16 gallons, and we had pots all around the kitchen. And so we need to get maple syrup to 200, we need to get the sap to 219 degrees for it to be syrup. So just above boiling water. And then if you want to make maple cream, which is absolutely delicious, you want to bring your syrup then up to 232 degrees. Now, if you want to make one of my favorite treats, and we don't get it that often now, but we did probably closer to 10 or 15 years ago, when we would get a lot of snow in March, late February and early March, you can take maple syrup and you can boil it to the point of 235 degrees, and you can pour it on snow. And this is how you're going to get maple taffy. And so this is an old practice that our ancestors did here in the Eastern Woodlands. It's recorded by many Europeans and settlers who came in, that the Native people would make or build trenches out of fresh snow and then boil the maple syrup and pour it in the snow. And then it rolls into a nice sticky taffy. And sometimes it's known as sugar on snow. Also, you can do snow cones as well. That's kind of fun to do with kids. And so moving up from there, you may be familiar with the more soft candies here in the New England region, if you're from here, or maybe if you're from kind of the Midwest, maybe there's maple sugar candies that are there, and those are the soft candies. And those are a big hit in my house. We make them sometimes, but we prefer to just pick some up, usually when we're on a quick road trip, and it's a nice little boost. And then finally, we are going to make our maple sugar today, and that's what we're working on. And this is granulated sugar. And so granulated sugar needs to go from its original boiling point of maple sap from 212 all the way to 260 degrees. And so maple sugar is a big hit in our house. We put it in our coffee, in our tea, in our baking, and you use it just like regular sugar. So here I have a candy thermometer, and we are getting up to that 260 degree point. Currently, we are just under 250. So you don't want to bring it up too quickly because you can start to burn it. We are carefully bringing it up, and once it gets to 260, we're going to pour it into a bowl. And I'll show you a little more about that later. But I just wanted to also let you know back here, we had been boiling kind of a remainder of maple sap. So now we have just a little teeny bit of maple syrup here. So you can see it's nice and amber in color. So I'm going to shut that off. And because it's such a small amount, and I'm not going to jar it or put it up in any way, I'll probably just add some hot water to it and some sassafras or sarsaparilla and make some tea. So you can see this maple syrup is billowing. This is very, very hot. I prefer to use a copper pan when I do this because copper, in addition to being very significant for our people, the heat transfer is instantaneous. So as soon as I shut this off, it's going to cool very quickly. If I took this pot and I put it in snow or in ice water, it's going to reach that temperature just about immediately, and the contents inside as well. So we are kind of getting up here, just watching this very carefully. I don't want to get my face too close to it, but traditionally, one of the ways that we would boil boil sap, we would use, prior to European arrival, clay vessels. And so I have a small clay vessel here. Now, I've seen many claims, and I've seen a lot of writings about stone boiling. However, when you're boiling outside and you're taking your stones and you're putting them in the fire and you're getting them nice and hot and getting ready to put them in their trenches, it all sounds like a great idea until you actually do it. And as much as you brush off your stones, you're always still going to get ash, and you're always still going to get lye in your syrup trenches or in your sugar trenches. And as we know, too much lye is toxic for your body. And so I know in the record, a lot of people, the archaeological record, people talk about this was one of the ways of processing. However, a lot of people leave out the use of clay vessels. And obviously, we are making soup, we are making tea, we are making stew, we are cooking all kinds of things in clay vessels. So why is it a stretch to think that we boiled maple sap down in these clay vessels? And so this is something that I hope to do kind of as the weather gets a little bit better. And I hope to kind of see the results pretty soon of that once we get a little more syrup or sap. I tend to use the terms interchangeably. I know they're not the correct terms, but it's so easy to slip from syrup to sap to sugar. But the maples that our family harvests now typically are silver maples and red maples because that's what's in our area. we have maybe in all 24 trees, maybe 1 or 2 sugar maples that we're tapping currently. But they tend to be further north of where we live, in more central Mass, central Connecticut, Massachusetts and Connecticut, whereas where we are on the coast, we tend to see red and silvers more. I mean, in my backyard, I have a big red maple. My neighbors have silver maples. But in the grove where we harvest, that's what we mainly are seeing. We're also seeing, we have 2 groves. In one of them, it's younger trees, and they're also surrounded with birches. So it's a fairly new forest. And then the other grove that we've been tapping at consistently for many years, it is mostly it's mostly maples and very mature birches, and also beeches. And so the beeches are indicative of a more mature forest in this region. If you've ever kind of spent time, we have a lot of white pines here, and those indicate, usually when you have a lot of white pine coming in, a younger forest. And this is due to a lot of the farm clearing that was done. And so historically, in the late 1600s and early 1700s, the majority of New England was clear cut. And so a lot of these beams, a lot of the wood was shipped out of here, and completely decimated our forests and our forest ecologies. And it was also a way to control native populations, because when you don't have when you don't have a really lush and thriving forest, and you are limited in your access to water, and you are moved around to certain areas like reservations, then you are more forced into farming and trading, and more European models of acquiring food. And so your subsistence practices are constantly being eroded and challenged. And so this really created a cascade of Native people getting out of a lot of the habits and traditions of subsistence practices. Though they were definitely maintained by many communities, the numbers of people doing them got smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I feel like there's definitely a revival in many of our modern communities today of subsistence fishing, subsistence harvesting, subsistence growing, subsistence mapling, and everybody loves food. So you need to just get out sometimes, and you just need to do it. Sometimes you just need to get out and you need to be on the land, and that's a good way of connecting back with your community, your family, and your ancestors, even in a time where we have to be distant. Forests are still healthy for us, and so it's a good place to go out and you feel refreshed. And so I've definitely been enjoying that. And that's been my personal saving grace through all of this quarantine, is being able to go out and practice subsistence gathering, and teaching our son about subsistence gathering as well. I mean, he's only 4, but he loves helping to haul the maple buckets, and he loves helping harvest corn and wild onions and many different things. And berry picking, of course, is his favorite because he's just a little bear. And so I think many different tribal communities are, especially in the greater New England region, are either maintaining their old economies of blueberry or cranberry harvesting, or strawberry harvesting, and maple harvesting. For many communities, making maple syrup, especially up north and down our neighbors at Mashantucket, it was a way to sustain themselves economically. And so the maple has always given its gifts to us. There are different stories around how maple came to the people, which I am not at liberty to share right now because in my tradition, there's no snow on the ground and the frogs are waking up. So we don't share our traditional stories right now. But there are places where you can read a little bit about how maple syrup came to some of the people of the Northeast, and how maple was at one time it flowed straight out of the trees as syrup, and the people took that for granted. And it's a good lesson to learn, because if you take things for granted, you will experience challenges, and so one of the consequences of that is now the maple syrup no longer flows out of the trees. Now it's sap, and we have to work for it, and we definitely work for it. So we are just getting, let's see, I keep adjusting my temperature here, which adjusts almost immediately, and we're getting just about to that hard ball phase. So just under 260. Once we hit 260, I'm going to transfer this very sticky toffee-like syrup into this wooden bowl. And then we're going to start the sugaring process. Just like with grades of maple syrup, you're going to grades of maple sugar. I'm assuming that this one will come out a little bit darker. It all depends on your mineral content, how quickly you do it. So I have some maple sugar right here that we made. This is kind of the last of the 2019 maple sugar. And then we made some earlier in later in 2020. So this is the first sugar of 2021. I try to all of my maple jars. So this is maple 21. This is batch 1. We do many different batches. And this kind of just lets me know kind of what the run is like. So batch 1 with the date of February 28th, it's a lot lighter than what we can maybe expect in mid-March. And this has to do with the different mineral content in the maple. All right, so I believe we are just about at 260. Just looking here. Of course, I had a little splash of maple come up onto the right onto the thermometer to where I need to see it go. So it's a little hard to see right now, and I don't want to get my face too close to it. But we're right below there. We just need to go one more degree. Like with any candy making, it's almost an exact science. So the tools that I'll be using include different paddles. I have different wooden paddles that I use. And so some of these are gifts, some were made by my husband, and these are all ways of scraping. Traditionally, we would have a long trench that you would make maple in, but I have this wooden bowl here. This suffices for now. But one day I will get myself a trench, and I will get myself a sugar shack, and I will get myself all of the things needed to make lots and lots of maple for my family. But right now we're just working in small steps and small batches. All right, so you can see that this is nice and pillowy. It's come up now. I'm going to shut it off and get myself some UV gloves. You can see it's folding in. It looks like lava. I'm just going to move that over there. All right. I'm going to cool for just a moment, so where it's manageable. All right. And this is where the magic happens. Let's see if I can do it so you can see. It's like lumpy clouds right now. I'm going to scrape the rest of this out. Oh, it's hot. So I'm just going to keep working it. This one's a little bit dark. I let it get a little too dark. I think I got excited and I heated it a little too quickly, but that's all right. It's going to give it a really nice, interesting flavor. And so now we're just going to work this until it turns granulated sugar. So this takes a lot of time. I only did a small amount. So when we learned about maple syrup production, right, it's about 40 gallons to 1. And that's also going to vary on the type of treat that you're using. When you're working in sugar, the ratio is 1 to 1. So 1 gallon of maple, or I should say 1 cup of maple syrup will lead you 1 cup of maple sugar. So I'm just working it here. And this is a great activity to do outside when you have a lot of people, because as soon as your arms get tired, you just pass it on to somebody else. I'll just keep going. It's getting harder up along the edges. It's getting harder to move.
So Leah, I don't mean to interrupt, but we had a question that popped up from one
Absolutely. Now is a great time for questions.
All right.
Just wondering what the bowl was made out of. Like, is it clay or it looks kind of like wood?
Oh yeah, this is wood here. Honestly, I don't know what kind of wood. My husband would be able to tell you by the grain. I'm guessing it's also maple. But yes, so the reason why you use wood is because it absorbs the excess moisture. And so that moisture is really drawing, or excuse me, the wood is really, really drawing the moisture out of your remaining liquid here. And you can see it's actually getting thicker. And I know it's hard to tell from the video, and I wish we could be in person and everybody could have their hand at doing this, but it's getting harder to work, especially right up around the edges where I'm not scraping it as well. That moisture is getting pulled right into the bowl. And now it has this consistency. It's kind of oscillating back and forth between, it's changing so quickly. As I'm trying to explain it, it's changed textures 3 times. So it started out as kind of a molassesy feel, and then it turned more into a caramel, very sticky caramel toffee feel. And then it went to what I imagine, I would say brownie batter, a really sticky, goopy brownie batter. And then we've gone more into the texture of peanut butter. And now you can see that it's really drying out here. And this is where shortly I will probably be switching tools. And we're getting this much drier sugar. So you can see. And we're just going to keep working this until almost all of the moisture content is out of it. So we have found that on days where it is stormy outside, and there's moisture in the air, you're going to get a different consistency of sugar. You're not going to get the fine, soft sugar. You're going to get more of a thicker sugar. Now, this could be a stage where I take this sugar right now in almost this hard pack stage, and we would traditionally put it in these maple cones here. And so this maple cone was made and gifted to me by a friend, Dan Shears. And If he's on, shout out to Dan. And so we would take the sugar in this stage and we'd pack it in here, and then these sugar cones would then be packed and traditionally either traded or used, and then you take a knife and you just scrape off what you need. Or you can keep working it and then you can get it into the finer sugar stage. So some of my favorite accounts, European accounts of interactions with Native people are around food and around maple. There's this account, I believe, from Canada, kind of north and west of us, and it's this Englishman's account of how he's complaining about the Native people because they would sell maple sugar to the English and trade maple sugar to the English at a higher premium than they would to the French. And to the French, they would sell pure sugar, but English, they would cut it with cornmeal. And I think that is, I don't know, I feel like it's very telling. I feel like it's telling about the social climate of the time, but also of kind of some of the practices and some of the techniques. And I think just that level of passive aggressiveness is kind of funny to read in these historical documents. And so there's this book called A Woodland Feast, and you can find more accounts of maple sugar and accounts just like that from the 17th and 18th centuries. So this is getting a little harder to work. So I'm going to take this scraper or this paddle here, and it has a rougher edge. And this is what I'm going to use to really scrape it out here. So I didn't grow up maple sugaring. I have community members that did. My husband and I, we kind of self-taught ourselves with a couple other community folks. We just love maple. I don't know. I mean, when I was pregnant, here's a funny little story. When I was pregnant, every day after my husband went to work, of course, I would go into the refrigerator and I would take a tablespoon of maple syrup. And that is just how much I love it and how much I craved it. And now my child is the same. He loves maple on everything. And so we just fell in love with it so much that we decided that we just had to do it. And so we worked with some people to find access to land for subsistence, and then just started tapping trees. And it was a learning curve, right? We read a lot about it. We talked to a lot of people, and we talked to a lot of Native people who did maple tapping, and we got their opinions and their expertise. And then we just started doing it. And like I said before, out of everything that I do every year, you know, in 2020, it was honestly the year where I finally grew a garden and I was successful at it. It was the year that we went out almost every month and we harvested mushrooms and fiddleheads and ramps and a lot of other things, a lot of fishing, a lot of shellfishing and hunting. And maple's just my favorite. Just consistently every year, it is really my favorite activity. And I know in other parts of the country, tribal communities, they also are experiencing either maple revival, or they have a long-standing tradition of it. And their community boils, they just look so wonderful. And I honestly can't wait until we can all gather again so we can do a community boil such as this. A community boil so we can do things such as this, like make sugar and make syrup and be able to provide for one another. because maple, despite it being sugar, out of all the sugars, it is the healthiest for you. It's quite high in antioxidants. And it is not a glucose. It is a sucrose type sugar. So if you have diabetes, it, I shouldn't say it doesn't affect you, because it does, of course. Any sugar will, but not in the same way or as quickly as glucose would, or fructose. We've also produced from our sugar bushes, there are a bunch of maples, black birches among the maples, and we have also made we have also made black birch syrup, but that was a kind of a one-time thing we did, because it was it was 100, the ratio is 100 gallons of sap to 1 gallon of syrup for the black birch. And so that was a lot of work, and you can't, it's very it's very picky. You can't use copper. You have to use stainless to boil, to simmer. You can't do a hard boil like you do with maple. You have to simmer it. So but it is very good, and it was very, I found it to be way more savory than maple syrup. And we didn't get it to the point of making maple syrup, or excuse me, maple sugar. Oh, I think I need to take a bite of the sugar and raise my blood sugar level so I can think a little more clear and have a taste test. It's very good. So we found that the birch was not as sweet as the maple. It was much more savory, but we did end up harvesting a lot of the water from it, a lot of the sap, and then we would freeze it and we would drink bottles of it. And those bottles of birch sap ended up sustaining us quite a bit, because they have a lot of minerals in them, and it was one of the ways that people would make spring tonics. So for different Native communities, especially if the winter was tough, you know, you may have been vitamin deficient in things, you know, especially if it's a really tough year and you can't find a lot of game, or maybe the ice fishing is not that great. And you're relying upon your stores, which are so important, but you also want something new and something refreshing. And so maple was really almost that fast breaker. Oops, there we go. So you can see it's starting to turn white here, and that's just the moisture coming out. And so I'm going to keep working this, but I would absolutely love to take questions if folks have questions.
Perfect timing, Leah. We did have a question come in about what kind of pot to use for heating sap. So the question was, do you recommend using a copper pot for heating sap?
You can. I don't. When we boil sap, I have I moved them all, but my favorite thing to boil on top of the stove is my turkey pan. This was my grandmother's turkey pan. We still cook turkey in it. You may have one, right? It's the one with the little specks in it. And we just put our maple sap right in it, and we put it on high. And we have this. I have a huge chowder pot, and then also we've been using other stainless steel pans. When we do it outside, you want to use a stainless steel pan, or if you have access to a huge copper pot, go for it. But that was the largest copper pot that I have. And what you want to do is you want to increase your surface area when you're boiling sap into syrup, because this is going to increase the evaporation rate. So it's going to go a lot quicker. So when you have reduced it to quite a minimal amount, you can then transfer it. I used a small stainless steel pot here. We have different sizes that we use in order to finish off the syrup. So now I'm using my fancy paddle, and this is what I'm using to remove kind of these grains off of the side and scrape them. And you see this light color, this is your soft granulated sugar. And I'm going to keep working this, and I'll continue to keep working this after the program is over as well, because we want to get it to a fine consistency like this. So just like it has a consistency similar anywhere between brown sugar and white sugar, or all natural cane sugar.
Wonderful. We had another question come in. The question is, what can you tell us about the role of folded birch bark baskets? I'm going to mispronounce this word, Leah. Mokuks, M-O-K-U-K-S,
Yep.
during the maple process.
Absolutely. So we have a couple of makuks that we use for, and also birch bark trays. I can't think of the word for tray right now. But traditionally, when you gather maple syrup or maple sap, you would have a longer spile or longer tap. Now, I showed you a modern stainless steel tap, and when you put those on the tree, you can put them right at waist height. But when you're using the traditional style trays, those typically sat on the ground. And when they sat on the ground, you would have a longer spile that comes right out of the tree and drips right into there. And because they are folded birch bark trays, you're going to want to empty those every few hours. So many Native people would leave their winter homes and they would go set up at maple camp for a few weeks. You know, it could be, you know, you can have a run that's as short as 2 weeks. A couple of years ago, we only had a run that was 2 weeks long, or you can have over a month long, depending on the weather. And so you would have people and communities go and set those up, and then the kids or the teenagers or whoever was there, it would be their job to go and round up those birch bark trays every few hours, because the rate of drip can sometimes be very rapid. Today we go to check our taps at least once a day, and then we haul them out in 5-gallon buckets. So so for us, a makuk is a birch bark basket that I have one that I can show you right over here. So if you look here, we have a makuk. I think this one was made by Barry Dana. And this is also what sugar could be stored in. So birch bark baskets are antibacterial, antifungal, antimicrobial. And so they really are our traditional Tupperware. And they help to keep out bacteria, as well as keep all the contents inside.
Wonderful. We have a couple more questions coming in. And just as a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to chat myself or May or Amelia. Or if you would like to ask the question to Leah yourself, you're more than welcome to use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we can unmute you and ask that way. But for now, it looks like we have a question about how many trees you tap every year, Leah.
So this year it's 24, but I couldn't help myself, so I ordered more equipment. So I think we're gonna tap 36 trees this year. And the first year we started, I think we only started with like 6 or 7 trees. And then the next year we bought more equipment. One of the things that is a challenge is my husband and I live in a suburban area, and we have to drive sometimes 25 minutes, sometimes 35 minutes, depending on where, to get to our tree stands. And we're not able to just walk out into our backyard because we only have one maple tree. And so we don't even tap that tree. We want healthy stands of trees, and we have to consider our capacity. We are both full-time employees, and even though there is grace amongst our employers in doing some of our traditional activities, we have other responsibilities too. So we do not overextend ourselves. So 24 to 36 taps is manageable right now for us. If we have more people help out, then we can expand upon that. But also, we're not looking to do production for sale. We do this for subsistence. We do this so we can have maple syrup throughout the year. And so the people that we tap with, you know, they also help, and they will also reap the benefits. It's really something that's shared, whereas like commercial might have 100 taps or 300 taps, you know, so and it's all about access too. So we don't own property that has maples on it. So we have to get agreements with property owners, and so that's kind of also a challenge, because not everybody who has the resources to own acres and acres of healthy land wants to share. So that's a consideration, you know, that we're always thinking about when it comes to subsistence, Indigenous access, and what that means.
Thank you, Leah. We have another, I think, quick question, which is, what is the age of the trees that you're tapping?
To be honest with you, I wouldn't know unless I cut down one of my trees. I know I shouldn't even say my trees, one of the trees. So in one grove, we have relatively young trees. We're guessing they're somewhere around 15 to 20 years old. I could be wrong. And then some of the others are older than me. I mean, we're not using 200-year-old trees. We're probably tapping trees that are somewhere between 40 and 60 years old. And when we go into tap, you know, there's an element of ceremony that goes into it. You know, we feast the trees, we give them water, we make our offerings, and then we ask the trees if they would like to give us their sap, if they would like to share with us so we can feed our family. And if a tree does not want to, it will not give you sap. And we have experienced that. There are a couple of trees where they're not interested, and they don't want to share their sap, and that's fine. So we try to move on to another tree, and we also petition that tree, and we ask it if it would like to share with us. And this is a concept that we've been practicing for generations.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Leah. I think that's about all the time we have for questions. But I know in the past you've encouraged folks to reach out to you if they have additional questions. So we can share your email in the chat if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Thank you so much for this wonderful program. And we hope folks join us next Wednesday for the next iteration of Gather, Make, Sustain.
Yes, absolutely. I hope to see you all there next week. And Katapatanamu, thank you all for listening. And I hope you're all inspired to go and make maple syrup or make maple sugar. And, you know, when you go out and if you want to tap a tree, you know, just ask for its consent, ask for its permission, and leave something behind for that tree as a thank you, something respectful. If you're so inspired to go out and try this.